Intro. Why did the Pope drag a corpse into the dark? What happened to the millions that simply disappeared from the Vatican? And what does the Catholic Church really know about the approaching end of the world? Are you ready to open the door to the dark side of the Vatican with us and dive into a world of shady intrigues and murderous machinations? Then hit the like and subscribe buttons and be sure to stay tuned until the end. The Pope's Valet, Vatileaks 1.0. In 2011 and 2012, the Pope's valet Paolo Gabriele smuggled numerous secret documents out of the Vatican, which plunged the Catholic Church into an unprecedented crisis. In this regard, there was talk of corruption, nepotism, and mismanagement, but that was by no means all. In addition, there is also said to be a secret homosexual lobby in the Vatican. In detail, the men would meet in a secluded villa, in a sauna, or a beauty salon to cultivate their ecclesiastically forbidden contacts. Sentenced in October 2012 to 10 months in prison for grand theft, Paolo Gabriele would be pardoned and released by Benedict XVI in December of the same year. Shady income, Vatileaks 2.0. A few years later, however, the next earthquake drove through the ranks of the Catholic Church. In 2015, piquant details came to light that had been uncovered in the course of an audit published in two books by journalists Emiliano Fittipaldi and Gianluigi Nuzzi. The Vatican repeatedly recorded shady income and in some breath squandered amounts in the millions. Some of the money apparently flew into luxury apartments, business-class flights, tailor-made clothing, and sinfully expensive furniture. And even apart from that, the spending raised gigantic question marks. During an inventory of food and other everyday items, goods worth €1.6 million were missing. In addition, funds that were actually intended for charitable organizations were misappropriated and diverted into the Vatican's pocket. Exorcism. What for most of us is no more than a disturbing relic from the Middle Ages is still firmly anchored in the ranks of the Catholic Church today: exorcisms. Currently, the International Association of Exorcists is represented in about 30 countries, all with the highly official blessing of the Pope, of course. If you like, Gabriele Amorth was the undisputed king of demon vanquishers. Active as an exorcist of the Diocese of Rome from 1986, the Italian is said to have driven out the devil and his henchmen more than 100,000 times. According to Amorth, the causes of possession can be quite different. For example, one could fall into the sights of satanic creatures by calling upon spirits, laying tarot cards, or having one's fortune told. But yoga and even the Harry Potter books would, in truth, have an anti-Christian character. Secrets of Fatima. It is July 13, 1917, when three simple shepherd children experienced something that puts not only themselves but also the entire Catholic Church in bright turmoil. At that time, the Blessed Virgin Mary had appeared, revealing to the children three secrets that corresponded to a direct insight into the terrifying destiny of the world. However, it would take until 1941 before the public learned of this mystical Marian operation. Even more, the third secret was stored even up to the year 2000 in a sealed envelope in the Vatican archives. In terms of content, the visions that the shepherd children went through could not have been more disturbing. First, they glimpsed the blazing hell, seeing a gigantic sea of fire in which the souls of sinners were incessantly tortured. The second secret contained a warning of a devastating war that would break out unless people stopped mocking God. The third and longest-kept secret then showed the children how the Pope would stride through the ruined, corpse-strewn world and ultimately be struck down by a group of soldiers. Evidence of aliens. If one follows a not entirely uncontroversial account, Russian scientist Genrikh Ludwig was given a unique opportunity in the 1920s to study the hidden documents of the Vatican secret archives. The manuscripts he examined there, however, had absolutely nothing to do with the official version of the Bible. Instead, the texts told of extraterrestrial intelligences that came to Earth in ancient times and paved the way for man's rise to civilization. From the ancient Egyptians to the Mayan culture, there was practically no people at the time who were not in contact with extraterrestrial visitors. Furthermore, he read about a fiery pillar that wiped out an advanced ancient civilization. From the descriptions, Ludwig concluded that it must have been a nuclear weapon explosion. Disturbing process. In January of 897, ex-Pope Formosus unexpectedly found himself in the dock. The accusations: the election of the Pope had been illegitimate and he had also broken an oath. The problem: the accused had already been dead for 9 months at the time of the trial. A circumstance, however, that did not prevent his successor Stephen VI from having the body exhumed, dressing it in papal vestments and finally planting it on the throne. After a macabre 3-day procedure, the deceased was lawfully condemned and deposed, buried in the stranger's burial ground in Rome, dug up again and finally thrown into the Tiber River. For the accuser Stephen VI, however, the subsequent triumph was short-lived. He was overthrown and killed a few months after the corpse trial. The Apocrypha. In 1684, the Vatican decided to remove 14 books from the Bible. What the true background of this drastic step was is still uncertain today. Some believe that the Apocrypha were banned from the Bible because they were not compatible with Christian ideas. Indeed, of some writings that the Church rejects, we know that they present the Lord and Savior in a completely different light. For example, in the Infancy Gospel according to Thomas, we learn that Jesus was an unruly boy who even killed one of his friends in a quarrel. Secret court. Not even the Church knows what charges are really tried in the so-called Apostolic Penitentiary. It is commonly believed, however, that this secret tribunal is called whenever a person has committed a heinous crime. This could be a priest violating the seal of confession or someone who has physically assaulted the Pope. But cases of abortion also end up before the Apostolic Penitentiary. Ultimately, only the Pope can absolve the accused of his sins or permanently expel him from the community of faith. Nazi escape helpers. After the end of World War II, many Nazis made off to go into hiding on the other side of the world. In detail, the escape routes mostly led via Italy or Spain to South America, mainly to Argentina. To this day, there is heated debate about the extent to which the Vatican was involved in organizing the Nazi escape. A report by the American Intelligence Service indicates that some notable Croatian fascists visited the Vatican and from there were smuggled into the Croatian National Church in Rome. Moreover, travel documents exist that suggest the pressing conclusion that the Vatican helped the Nazis leave the country. However, the Catholic Church has declined to comment on these allegations. Genocide in Rwanda. Between April and July 1994, approximately 800,000 to 1 million people were killed in Rwanda. The members of the Hutu caused a cruel massacre in the Tutsi minority, and until today there is debate about the complicity of the Catholic Church in this horrible genocide. What is certain is that the Catholic Church maintained close contacts with President Juvenal Habyarimana at the time, and that many mass executions were carried out in churches. For example, the priest Athanasi Saramba lured 2,000 people into a church only to have the building demolished by a bulldozer. The survivors were subsequently shot by Hutu soldiers. In the aftermath, dozens of clergy were indicted for their involvement in the genocide. While Pope John Paul II still denied any complicity, 20 years later Pope Francis officially asked for forgiveness. John VII is a woman, Pope Joan. The following basic requirements must be met to become Pope. One must be Catholic, unmarried, and male. It is precisely this last point that forms the starting point of the centuries-old legend. In truth, John VII is said to have been a woman between the years 872 and 882 in office. This assumption circulates already at least since the 13th century. The problem, whether the ominous papist Joanna in this form really existed, cannot be proved from a scientific view. As a result, the majority of experts believe that the myth has no real core. Coronavisor. Alien skulls, diabolical magic books, and a functioning time machine. When it comes to the questions of those mystical objects slumbering in the Vatican secret archives, the imagination of the internet knows no bounds. The legendary coronavisor is said to have been among the forbidden artifacts stored there. Allegedly developed with the help of renowned scientists such as Wernher von Braun and Enrico Fermi, it would be a device that opens an optical window into the past. Despite all official evidence, the coronavisor has already been used to observe the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The machine is capable of capturing the electromagnetic waves of the past and making them visible. Orphans, the Duplessis orphans. In the 1940s and 1950s, numerous Canadian children in the province of Quebec were placed in psychiatric institutions although they were actually perfectly healthy. The background: the corresponding institutions were much better subsidized by the government than orphanages. While the government subsidy for an orphan was $1.25 per day, it was $2.75 for a psychiatric patient. Named after then Prime Minister Maurice Duplessis, many children were deliberately misclassified in order to collect additional funds. In the process, a total of 7 church religious congregations were involved in running the facilities in question. Later, more than 50% of the pitiful children claimed to have been physically, mentally, or sexually abused during their stay. Electric shocks and lobotomies were also allegedly performed on the healthy patients. Mysterious death. It is August 26, 1978, when Albino Luciani is elected the 263rd Pope. But just 33 days later Luciani, who henceforth went by the name John Paul I, was no longer alive. Officially, his body was found in bed with a smile on his face. However, there is still a great deal of guesswork about the exact cause of death, which is primarily due to the fact the Vatican strictly refuses an autopsy of the corpse. Against this background, many people believe that John Paul I did not die a natural death. Thus, the church leader is said to have played with the thought of uncovering the corrupt machinations of the Vatican Bank. Because of this, he was insidiously poisoned. The theories, which bring the incident with the Jesuits, the Freemasons, or even extraterrestrials in connection, sound still more crazy. Thus, still on the night of death, UFOs were sighted over Rome. Otro. Thank you very much for watching. Leave us very gladly a thumbs up and a subscription there in order to experience soon more over the most frightening machinations of the Vatican. Finally, tell us what you think. Given all the scandals, can you understand why more and more people are leaving the Church, or should we not lump the Roman Catholic Church together so easily?